others off. A couple of years ago, we all got used to a constant Russia lament about supposed Western plots on influence Russian society. In reality, of course, it is Russia that is spending millions of dollars subverting democratic processes around the world. Later, when the Russian regime was trying to justify its invasion of Ukraine, it alleged a systematic oppression of Russian speakers in the Donbass. In reality, of course, it is Russia that is today trying to erase the Ukrainian language and the cultural identity in the territories that it occupies in Ukraine. What can we learn from this? First, that a behavioral pattern like this is often referred as a projection in psychology. And second, that when Putin tells Russian media his country is not planning to fight European countries, but if Europe were to start a war, he is, and I quote, ready right now. We should all be worried indeed. Because Russian hybrid actions are already targeting us in Europe as we speak. Parcels sent to German logistic hubs that go up in flames. Spy drones hovering over airports and Bundeswehr barracks. Cyber attacks against keynotes of our civilian infrastructure. These actions are calling for an adequate response. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, it is not a matter of choice that the harsh logic of military deterrence is the main strategic imperative of our time. It is a matter of fact. I am glad in this day and age it is you, dear Mark, whose leadership we count on both sides of the Atlantic. And I'm glad that we agreed at our summit in The Hague to a new defense investment pledge of 5%. Germany will meet our new spending target well before the 2035 deadline. This year alone, as many of you know, Germany made relevant steps toward facing up our geopolitical reality. In March, we adapted our constitution to allow for more adequate military spending. Last week, the Bundestag passed a reform of our conscription law. And more importantly, this year, Germany has also become Ukraine's biggest supporter in terms of both military and non-military assistance. At last week's NATO foreign ministers' meeting, together with Norway, Poland and the Netherlands, dear Mark, we announced financing for 2 additional packages of acquisitions under the prioritized Ukraine requirements list, bringing our total contribution to $700 million. But I also want to say this: more allies in Europe need to urgently step up. We are grateful for the United States' efforts in pursuing a lasting peace in Ukraine. Relevant progress has been made with crucial Ukrainian and European involvement in sketching out key principles for this. This includes, in particular, securing an end to the war that leaves Ukraine sovereign, independent, and secure from future Russian aggression. Ukraine has shown remarkable flexibility, most importantly, an openness towards an immediate and unconditional ceasefire. But we are yet to see any meaningful Russian readiness to negotiate. The Russian position today seems to almost boil down to: if we don't get for free, what we couldn't get during 11 years of fighting, we won't even talk. That is not a serious negotiation position. But it is a potent reminder that this war will probably only end when Putin feels that the consequences of continuing it having become too painful. To get there are, in my view, two things that we, as European allies, need to do. First, we need to increase the pressure on Russia. We need to let Russia know that the costs, especially the long-term costs of continuing its senseless war, are only about to rise. Leveraging Russia's frozen sovereign assets in Ukraine, as proposed by German Chancellor Merz, is a necessary step towards that end. But secondly, and even more importantly, we need to maintain cohesion within NATO. For what sets us apart from Russia is this: we say what we do what we say, and we stand on the side of freedom. And as free countries, the differences in political outlook that will ever cease to exist between us should never drive us apart. For they are first and foremost this, an important source of our strength. I thank you, and I look now forward to hearing you, dear Mark, the Secretary General of NATO. Thank you so much.
Well, dear Johan, dear Detlef, dear Wolfgang, good afternoon, and of course, good afternoon to all of you, and thank you for the warm welcome. It is always good to be in Berlin. Just over 36 years ago, on a now famous night in November, NATO Secretary General Manfred Wörner jumped in his car and drove through the night to Berlin. In the rush, he forgot to tell his staff in Brussels where he was going. Manfred was heading home to Germany to join the crowds celebrating the fall of the Berlin Wall. Today, a section of the wall stands at NATO headquarters. It was a barrier to keep people in and ideas out. And now it is a monument to the force of freedom, a reminder of the power of unity and a lesson that we must stay strong, confident and steadfast. Because the dark forces of oppression are on the march again. I'm here today to tell you where NATO stands and what we must do to stop a war before it starts. And to do that, we need to be crystal clear about the threat. We are Russia's next target. And we are already in harm's way. When I became NATO Secretary General last year, I warned that what is happening in Ukraine could happen to allied countries too. That we had to shift to a wartime mindset. This year we took the big decisions to make NATO stronger. At the summit in The Hague, allies agreed to invest 5% of GDP annually in defense by 2035. We agreed to increase defense production across the alliance. And we agreed to continue our support to Ukraine. But this is not the time for self-congratulation. I fear that too many are quietly complacent. Too many don't feel the urgency. And too many believe that time is on our side. It is not. The time for action is now. Allied defense spending and production must rise rapidly. Our armed forces must have what they need to keep us safe. And Ukraine must have what it needs to defend itself. Now. Our governments, parliaments, and our citizens have to be in this together, so that we can continue to protect peace, freedom and prosperity, our open societies, our free elections and a free press. We must all accept that we must act to defend our way of life now. Because this year, Russia has become even more brazen, reckless and ruthless towards NATO and towards Ukraine. During the Cold War, President Reagan warned about the aggressive impulses of an evil empire. Today, President Putin is in the empire-building business again. He is throwing everything he has at Ukraine, killing soldiers and civilians, destroying the havens of humanity, homes, schools and hospitals. So far this year, Russia has launched over 46,000 drones and missiles against Ukraine. Russia is likely producing 2,900 attack drones a month and a similar number of decoys to distract air defenses. And in 2025, Russia produced around 2,000 land attack cruise and ballistic missiles. It is close to peak production. And while Putin is trying to destroy Ukraine, he is also devastating his own country. There have been over 1.1 million Russian casualties since he began his war in 2022. And this year, Russia has lost, on average, 1,200 troops a day. Think about that. More than 1 million casualties so far and 1,200 a day killed or wounded this year alone. Putin is paying for his pride with the blood of his own people. And if he is prepared to sacrifice ordinary Russians in this way, what is he prepared to do to us? In his distorted view of history and the world, Putin believes that our freedom threatens his stranglehold on power and that we want to destroy Russia. Putin is doing a good job of that all by himself. Russia's economy is now geared to wage war, not to make its people prosperous. Russia is spending nearly 40% of its budget on aggression. And around 70% of all machine tools in Russia are used in military production. Taxes are going up, inflation has skyrocketed, and petrol is rationed. Putin's next presidential campaign slogan should be, "Make Russia weak again." Not that he is troubled by free and fair elections, of course. And how is Putin able to continue his war against Ukraine? The answer is China. China is Russia's lifeline. China wants to prevent its ally from losing in Ukraine. Without China's support, Russia could not continue to wage this war. For example, about 80% of critical electronic components in Russian drones and other systems are made in China. So when civilians die in Kyiv or Kharkiv, Chinese technology is often inside the weapons that kill them. And let's not forget that Russia also relies on North Korea and Iran in its fight against freedom, with ammunition and military equipment. So far, Putin has only played the peacemaker when it suits him, to buy time to continue his war. President Trump wants to end the bloodshed now. And he is the only one who can get Putin to the negotiating table. So let's put Putin to the test. Let's see if he really wants peace, or if he prefers the slaughter to continue. It is essential that all of us keep up the pressure on Russia and support the genuine efforts to bring this war to an end. NATO support means Ukraine can defend itself today, be in a strong position to secure a just and lasting peace, and be able to deter any Russian aggression in the future. Billions of dollars worth of critical military hardware is flowing into Ukraine, sourced from the United States, paid for by allies and partners. This is firepower only America can provide. We are doing this through a NATO initiative, indeed we call Pearl. Since it was launched this summer, Pearl has supplied around 75% of all missiles for Ukraine's Patriot batteries, and 90% of the ammunition used in its other air defense systems. And I want to thank Germany and all our allies for their support. Pearl is keeping Ukraine in the fight and protecting its population. And I count indeed on more allies to contribute to Pearl and to step up support to Ukraine in many other ways. Because we must strengthen Ukraine so they can stop Putin in his tracks. Just imagine if Putin got his way. Ukraine under the boot of Russian occupation. His forces pressing against a longer border with Nato. And a significantly increased risk of an armed attack against us. It would require a truly gargantuan shift in our deterrence and defense. NATO would have to substantially increase its military presence along the eastern flank. And allies would have to go much further and faster on defense spending and production. In such a scenario, we would long for the days when 3.5% of GDP on core defense was enough. The number would grow massively. And with that imminent threat, we would have to act fast. There would be emergency budgets, cuts to public spending, economic disruption, and further financial pressure. In that scenario, painful trade-offs would be unavoidable, but absolutely necessary to protect our people. So let's not forget, Ukraine's security is our security. NATO's own defenses can hold for now. But with its economy dedicated to war, Russia could be ready to use military force against NATO within 5 years. Russia is already escalating its covert campaign against our societies. Russia's list of targets for sabotage is not limited to critical infrastructure, the defense industry and military facilities. There have been attacks on commercial warehouses and shopping centers, and explosives hidden in parcels. And Poland is now investigating sabotage against its railway network. This year we have seen reckless airspace violations by Russia, whether it is drones over Poland and Romania or fighter jets over Estonia. Such incidents put lives in danger and raise the risk of escalation. And while we often think of the risk primarily in terms of our eastern flank, Russia's reach is not limited to land. The Arctic and the Atlantic are additional avenues. A reminder yet again of why this alliance has been so crucial for so many years on both sides of the Atlantic. So we are working together to ensure the safety and security of all allies, on land, at sea and in the air. We have increased our vigilance and strengthened our deterrence and defense along the eastern flank with Eastern Sentry. And we continue to protect our critical infrastructure at sea with Baltic Sentry. NATO's response to Russia's provocations has been calm, decisive and proportionate. But we need to be prepared for further escalation and confrontation. Our enduring commitment to NATO's Article 5, that an attack on one is an attack on all, sends a powerful message. Any aggressor must know that we can and will hit back hard. And that is why we made the crucial decisions in The Hague on defense spending, on production and support for Ukraine. And yes, we are seeing important progress. Look at ammunition production. We have seen a six-fold increase in European production of 155mm artillery shells compared with 2 years ago. I visited a new factory in Germany, in Unterlüß, this year, which plans to produce 350,000 artillery shells a year. Germany is fundamentally shifting its approach to defense and industry to increase defense production. And the investments Germany is making in its armed forces are extraordinary. Around 152 billion planned for defense by 2029, 3.5% of its GDP by 2029. Germany is a leading power in Europe and a driving force in NATO. German leadership is essential for our collective defense. Its commitment to doing its fair share for our security is an example to all allies. We need to be ready, because at the end of this first quarter of the 21st century, conflicts are no longer fought at arm's length. Conflict is at our door. Russia has brought war back to Europe, and we must be prepared for the scale of war our grandparents and great-grandparents endured. Imagine it, a conflict reaching every home, every workplace. Destruction, mass mobilization, millions displaced, widespread suffering and extreme losses. It is a terrible thought. But if we deliver on our commitments, this is a tragedy we can prevent. NATO is here to protect 1 billion people on both sides of the Atlantic. Our mission is to protect you, your families, your friends, and your future. We cannot let down our guard, and we won't. I count on our governments to keep up with their commitments and go further and faster, because we cannot falter or fail. Listen to the sirens across Ukraine. Look at the bodies pulled from the rubble. Think of the Ukrainians who might go to sleep tonight and not wake up tomorrow. And what is standing between what's happening to them and what could happen to us? Only NATO. I have a duty as Secretary General to tell you what lies ahead if we don't act faster, invest in defense, and continue our support for Ukraine. And I know this is a hard message as we head towards the festive season, when our thoughts turn to hope, light, and peace. But we can take courage and strength knowing that we stand together in NATO, with determination, and the knowledge that we are on the right side of history. We have a plan, we know what to do, so let us deliver. We must. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Secretary General. Great speech, if I may say. We don't have a lot of time. We have approximately, because Secretary General has an important follow-on meeting, we have approximately 20 minutes. So if you have a good question to ask, let me know. But let me use my privilege of sitting up here by asking the first question of both of you. Everybody knows, as has been said publicly, that we have entered what appears to be a critical moment in the negotiations about how to end and when to end the Ukraine war. I'd really like to have your view and your view also, Foreign Minister. How close are we? Do you really believe that there is, you've expressed some skepticism in your remarks, that there is a willingness by the Russian side to sign a quote-unquote deal. How close are we? Some people have told me that it might be possible to get something done before Christmas. Well, how wonderful would that be? Is that an illusion? Please.
It's difficult to say, that's the honest answer. And I can only say that President Trump, the Americans, are working tirelessly to get this done. And I really want to commend them for that. And Germany and France and United Kingdom, Poland, Italy, and the other European allies and Canada are helping, and the Netherlands to support wherever they can the peace effort. And of course, there are various elements. One is, how do you reconstruct Ukraine? There was some news yesterday that progress is being made there. We know that it will be crucial after a long-term ceasefire / a peace deal that the Russians will never ever try again to attack Ukraine. So there have to be security guarantees in place of such a quality and level that Putin knows if he tries again, the reaction will be devastating. And we all know there will be a delicate, difficult discussion about territory, which in the end only the Ukrainians can decide about. Do I think that when it comes to Ukraine, the US and Europe to get to one page? Yes, I'm positive. I think we can. Am I sure that the Russians will accept? I don't know. This is the test, which I also said in my speech. We have to test Putin now whether he is serious. And the guy is willing last month to suffer 25,000 of his own people. 25,000 people dead. Not seriously wounded, no, killed, dead. 25,000. 1.1 million dead or seriously wounded over the last 4 years. So let's see whether he is getting to a point where he thinks that this is unsufferable for him and his people and that he wants to make a deal. But that's of course the big test coming up.
I would only add 2 points. The first one is we will only get Putin to that very point if it is absolutely clear that we as Europeans, and of course the United States as well, are with the Ukraine, will support Ukraine, that we will be able, especially in the European Council in the next week, to make it possible to make use of the Russian sovereign assets. That's where the German government is working for. This is a proposal of Chancellor Merz. And we are slightly optimistic to get it through. This is absolutely our target. And Putin has to know, whatever happens, he may be ready for an agreement or not. We will be supporting Ukraine, defending the sovereignty of Ukraine and be with the people there. Secondly, of course, everybody would expect Ambassador to have an agreement before Christmas. That would be really great, the best Christmas gift for everybody, especially for the suffering people in Ukraine. But it has to be a sustainable solution. So if you look back into German history, it's always not so easy to compare the very historical situation. But we know from the situation after the Second World War, how it was ended, with, of course, the military saying, okay, the weak politicians agreed to a peace treaty, which was not necessary at that very point. And that was always a burden for the Weimar Republic here in Germany. So we have to have that in mind, and that was also a point I made in Beijing with my colleague Wang Yi in these days, because he also asked me, why not making an agreement, why not handing over Donetsk to Russia? We as Europeans know what it means to have a peace deal which is acceptable and bearable for the people in Ukraine, and which in a way also is part of the guarantees we all need for the future, not to be faced with a new Russian aggression in the future.
All right, thank you very much. Since we're here 3 men on the stage, I'll go to a lady first. There is a lady who's raising her arm. Let's go to that lady first.
Anja Wielaschek, international editor at Tagesspiegel. Secretary General, both you and Minister Wadefuhl have stressed the value of unity, that cohesion, both within the EU and NATO, is our strength. However, we've seen the 28-point plan that tried to formulate commitments to third parties and NATO about NATO's future. We've seen communication coming out of Washington saying that NATO's capabilities in Europe should be served within a very steep timeline. How do you convince someone who does not see value in unity and cooperation of just that aim? And maybe as a plan B, do you see a future for a NATO where the US is explicitly or implicitly withdrawn, a European or other coalition of the willing within NATO?
To your second question, no. I don't see that. I think it is crucial that we keep the transatlantic bond as strong as it is today, and it is very strong. When you look at the national security strategy the US brought out, I know there was a lot of talk, of course, in European capitals, but look at what it's actually saying. Complete commitment to European security, complete commitment to NATO, and a complete commitment to the fact that we can only defend the Euro-Atlantic area if we stick together. And yes, there's a lot you can discuss about, but this is at the core there. When you take President Trump, when he was in his first term and now in his second term, he has been extremely clear that he is totally committed to NATO, having one big irritant, the fact that Germany, the Netherlands and many other countries were not even getting to the old 2%, let alone spending what he is spending, 3.5%. And now in The Hague, we have dealt with this. We decided to move to the 3.5%, equalize with the US. I think it is his biggest foreign policy success when it comes to the Euro-Atlantic area. And not only because we want to equalize with the US, but because we need to spend this money to keep ourselves safe from the Russians. And also taking a careful look at the Chinese military build-up taking place today. And Europe is now stepping up. Germany is leading that whole phase of stepping up with the defense spending here. Germany's presence in Baltic Century, Eastern Century, the coalition of the willing, where Germany and the UK and France and others are working together to agree on what is necessary to keep Ukraine safe post a peace deal, and of course Pearl, so the money needed to buy from America to give the essential weapons to Ukraine. Again, Germany taking the lead. So Europe is stepping up, Germany taking the lead there, but many others also absolutely stepping up, including the Netherlands, the Scandinavians, the Baltics, and of course Poland and many others. So we are in a much better place. So I'm absolutely convinced this alliance is there to stay, and it is crucial. Also in the US interest, because you cannot defend the US without a Arctic which is defended. And for the Arctic you need NATO. You cannot defend the US without a safe Atlantic. And you need NATO to keep the Atlantic safe. Look at the nuclear submarines the Russians have who might want to sail towards the US coasts. And you cannot keep the US safe without a safe Europe. And the Americans know this. All the senior policy makers from the White House down to the State Department, to the Pentagon, they all know this. And they all agree with this.
Great. If you ask a question, please identify yourself and please make sure we know whether you address the question to both speakers or only to one of them. Let's go to Matthias Gebauer first, and then we'll go to this side of the aisle. Yes.
Hi, it's Matthias Gebauer, German magazine Der Spiegel. Mr. Rutte, I have one question. You very much underlined the ongoing and permanent threat Russia poses to Europe, but you also mentioned right now that Russia is also a threat to the US. On the other hand, in the just very recent national security strategy the White House put out, Russia is not even named as a threat. It's quite the opposite. It's named as we want like stabilize the relations towards Russia, which is a stark contrast also to the communique of the Hague summit, where Russia is mentioned as the main threat to NATO. How, as NATO Secretary General, how do you want to align these two views? And did you already talk to President Trump about the contents of the national security strategy and this very opposing lines towards Russia?
Well, again, let me tell you what I'm in all my discussions with the United States when it comes to NATO, when it comes to the defense of the US itself and the collective defense of the Euro-Atlantic. And I don't want to repeat the previous question because we do not have so much time, but let me refer to my reaction to the previous question. I think there's the evidence that the US is not in NATO only because they didn't want to repeat the mistake after the Second World War, they made after the First World War. of not being involved. They are in NATO because it is providing them with the direct security they need for their future. And it has to do, of course, with Europe. And that's clear in the NSS, in this national security strategy, that they're completely committed to the European security, NATO security, and working together. But it also has to do, as I said, with the Arctic and the Atlantic. These are three key elements of NATO which are there not only to keep Europe safe, but to keep the whole of the Euro-Atlantic safe. And when it comes to the Indo-Pacific, they also, of course, have to spend time there. That's clear. And NATO is not directly involved. We have a close cooperation with many countries there in this Indo-Pacific for cooperation. But it was the American president explicitly asking me when I first visited him in the White House in March this year, after he got back into office, after his inauguration, to make sure that we kept that relationship as the IP4 close, because he and all the senior policymakers know that these two theaters, the Indo-Pacific and the Euro-Atlantic, are closely connected.
May I add, I would ask all of us not to put things in doubt which nobody puts in doubt in Washington, but only which is put in doubt perhaps and which is challenged in Moscow and in Beijing. And this is the strength and the cohesion of our alliance. And as the 28-point plan was mentioned, it is no longer existing. We had some influence on it. When it was made public, we were able to talk to the Americans. I was able to talk to Steve Witkoff and to discuss the points. We were able to discuss it with Marco Rubio. And we have a new plan, which is a 20-point plan, and which has really changed. So do we have to be engaged with the United States more than before? Yes. Is it possible to find a common ground? Yes. And that was the very success of the Hague summit in this springtime. So when we went forward, when we were clear that we are engaged, that we not only spend 2%, but we are ready to spend 5% or more, United States were there. And of course, there was a common ground, and we found that common declaration. And you see no doubts, also in this specific new paper from Washington, which really put in doubt the nuclear umbrella and the willingness to defend Europe together with the European allies. And please do us not allow to raise questions which were really in the end of the day not raised in Washington.
All right, we'll go to this side of there. Where were the questions here? The gentleman over there.
Jan Dąbinski, Polish ambassador to Berlin. One question to Secretary General. In all this discussion about security guarantees for Ukraine, I've nothing found about reduction of Russian military presence on our borders. Is it a part of a discussion? Because this would be the best security guarantee for Ukraine, the militarization of Crimea or of occupied territories, at least to reduce the Russian presence against Ukraine and against us.
Ambassador, I understand the question. Of course, I am aware of various stages of all the discussions, so I cannot go into all the details. But what I was talking about was primarily focusing on making sure that whatever the military power of the Russians, and at this moment that's considerable given their extreme investments now in defense, total defense budget $200 billion, and with their purchasing power, that's about the same as the whole of European NATO is spending on defense in terms of purchasing power. So it's really a lot of money, and they don't have all the bureaucracy we have, so they can take the decisions quickly, easily move to this wartime economy as they have done. And that's why they are posing a threat immediately. And what we need to do with these security guarantees, first of all, is to make sure that they will never try again, by knowing that our reaction will be, as I said, devastating. That's now the prime focus.
We have time for maybe 2 more questions. There's the lady, yes, in the 4th row there.
Yes, sorry, go ahead. You speak after me, sorry. Sorry, my name is Anne Hoed-Herkes. I'm the chair of the Königswinter organization. My question is addressed to both gentlemen. In your brilliant speech, Secretary General, you referenced the fall down of the Berlin Wall. And I remember when I was a young diplomat, we drew extraordinary insights from the fragility both of the Eastern European, and I apologize about this to our European friends, and Russia and the Soviet Union in particular. Question. To what degree, in your strategic foresight and insights, does intelligence knowledge, and I'm aware you cannot share everything here, play a role about the actual fragility, potential fragility of the current Kremlin regime? And how does that weigh, if it does, Foreign Minister, how does that weigh in your defense strategy? Thank you.
Yes, of course, you already gave a part of the answer yourself, that it's a bit difficult to get too much into that. But let me just more generally react that I was 14 years Prime Minister of the Netherlands, and I had a lot of dealings with Putin before he invaded Crimea. And then after Crimea, because of MH17, the downing of the Malaysian airplane, where 298 people died. And I had a lot of calls with Putin then and met him later in G20 meetings on that subject. And I've stopped a long time ago to guess what's up in his head. I look at the facts. And the fact that you have a dictator willing to sacrifice 1.1 million of your own people. Take Pokrovsk. We are all now intimately aware of the geography of Ukraine. We all know what Pokrovsk is in Donbass, in Donetsk. And that small city of 60,000 people, they started the onslaught on that city in the summer of 2024. It is now the end of 2025. They still have not captured it. And in the meantime, on this front line, they are losing, last month, 25,000 people getting killed. If you have a dictator willing to do this, because you have this crazy idea of some historical whatever he has, then you have to be very careful. And we have to stand ready. And that's why it is crucial that the biggest economy in Europe, and that is Germany, with its enormous power, has decided in already under Scholz with the Zeitenwende, and then with Chancellor when this government was formed in March, even before the government was formed, under the leadership of now Chancellor Merz, to make this extraordinary investment in this defense. It is crucial. Please, I know also in Germany some people are questioning, do we really need to do this? Yes. If you love the German language and you do not want to speak Russian, it is crucial. It is a sine qua non, because otherwise this guy will not stop with Ukraine. That's, I think, what we have to be very watchful of.
I could only add there are some more good reasons, but only to speak German. We'll have to speak German. But yes, I know that. But let me please, only perhaps one consideration. We do see that our sanctions are in place and that they have effects on the Russian economy. And of course it works. Nobody knows exactly and could define what it means for the decision-making process of Mr. Putin and his comrades. Okay, but it works on the ground, and I would only encourage all of us to go consequently alongside with this way forward, because sanctions are the only, besides the military support for Ukraine, are really pressuring Russia, and in the end of the day, of course, it will play a role in his last decision.
We have time for one last question. Jana, over there.
Jana Pugliarin, European Council on Foreign Relations. Just one quick question coming back to the US national security strategy. There is a passage in there saying that the US wants to rebalance strategic stability in Europe. Coming back also to the nuclear aspect, how do you interpret this? What does that mean? What is the US thinking behind rebalancing strategic stability with the Russians in Europe?
Well, what we have seen over time, of course, is that basically let Russia to the side for a moment, but when we look at the American foreign policy and its approach to NATO, first of all, there was this big irritant of the European and Canadian allies not spending the same as the Americans were spending. That is now dealt with. And again, Germany, even 6 years before the 2035 deadline, getting to this 3.5%, crucial. Then the Americans have always been clear also that they expect Europe to do more. To do more of the heavy lifting. And why is that? Because the US also has to concentrate on the Indo-Pacific and other parts of the world, knowing that these theaters are more and more getting interconnected. So that's what you will see over the coming years, a shift. Not dramatic, but to some extent in Europe we will have to take care more of our own defense. This whole rumor about 2027 is not right. US has also confirmed that, so that's off. This Reuters report on Friday was not right. But more generally, yes, it is clear that Europe will have to step up, and that's exactly what we are doing.
And is there room of enhancement? Of course there is. I would only add one point. We should not only concentrate on the so-called end question, because we have some restrictions also legally binding for Germany, but we have some other qualities like deep precision strike capabilities, and that's where we are concentrating on, and that has similar effects and can have similar effects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know I have to apologize to all those who wanted to come in, but we've really run out of time. I apologize. The one thing I know is that these two gentlemen will meet again at a certain event in Munich in mid-February, and some of you will also be there. I'm sure many of the journalists, media people will be there. So let's meet again in February, hopefully with good news, better news than the news we've had in recent days and weeks. Thank you all for participating. Let's give our two speakers a round of applause, please. And I think our Bavarian hosts are kind enough to invite us to a glass or something to eat downstairs. Thank you very much.